7:30, so we'll make a start. Thank you for joining with us tonight. It is I'm responsible just to tell you about the fire exits. There's the door you came in, and there's other ones around the building. It's fairly straightforward. Just come out the door you came in and say, leave by one of those exits. Just a little bit of a quick introduction. Thank you for joining with us tonight. We're putting on this short series of 3 lectures, which we hope you'll find enlightening and informative. We are students like you and enjoy the thrill of discovering new things. What we know affects what we believe, and that shapes our actions and how we interact with the world around us. We're just a group of Christians just seeking to present what we come to understand and what the Bible teaches. And we'll be here every night, Monday through to Friday this week, 7:30 to 8:30. We're seeking to find answers to hard questions. If you have a mobile phone, please turn it to silent now, and we'll be very happy to answer questions at the end. Just by way of a very brief personal introduction, my name is David Montgomery. I was born in Trinidad in the West Indies, and I came over to the UK for education. Eventually that brought me into the Coventry area, and that's where I still am today. I'm a chartered engineer, and I was so inclined I could put a DR in front of my name, thanks to many years of study at Coventry University. But that's enough about me. I'm going to start each of these little talks with a couple of fun facts. The image on the screen is the sun. Of course, that's fairly easy to remind ourselves of despite the weather conditions. But it takes about 8 minutes for sunlight that leaves the sun to arrive at planet Earth. We know that light travels at about 300 million meters per second. So if you do some sums, that takes us to a distance of about 150 million kilometers from the sun. Now thankfully, we don't need a very long tape measure to work out that distance. We just need some basic geometry. But that is how we know a little bit about our sun and about how far away it is. The fact number 2 is we don't really know why the Earth is at this perfect distance from the sun for there to be an abundance of water for life to thrive here. And what have I done? Firstly, I presented something as scientific fact. It's not easy to verify, but it is possible to verify the distance from the Earth to the sun. But it is something measurable, it's something repeatable, it's something that we can experiment on. That's what science gives us. Many of the answers to how something actually works. But science has limitations beyond that. It cannot explain the second statement. We know that water is essential for life. That's why there is literally a galactic search going on through the cosmos for water on other planets. We know that the distance of our sun is very precisely set so that it enables water to exist. Many are focused on our current environmental crisis of global warming, which is from the increase of only a few degrees. If the Earth was closer to the sun, the water would boil off. If it was further from the sun, it would freeze. Science doesn't tell us why we are seemingly so fortunate to have this particular situation. More importantly, science cannot either. The Big Bang. The universe had a beginning. It is one of those things that's widely reported that a finite time ago there was something called the Big Bang. Now this might seem a staggering long time ago, quoted 13 or so billion years, difficult to put into context when sometimes you can't even remember what you had for breakfast yesterday morning. And you were there yesterday morning. I can say with all assurance that there was nobody there 13 billion years ago to confirm anything. But the crucial discovery that we can say is that the universe is not eternal. In other words, it had a beginning. Science has given us that. We can understand the idea of something having a beginning, coming into being. This is my birth certificate in my hand. It's not a forgery. I genuinely am as old as I look. And this piece of paper here is the evidence. Therefore, it tells me that I had a beginning. I'm not going to tell you the story of the birds and the bees about how I began. I expect that's one of those biology lessons that you paid attention to in class. But what we do see is In the same way, when we look out to the stars in the universe, it must have had a cause. It must have had a cause to make it begin. We know it began. That's what science has told us. But the cause must be bigger than the universe and even outside time itself. So we basically need an eternal and infinite force to be the cause for the existence of the universe in which we live. And many scientists balk at this idea because the logical candidate is this idea called God. But is that the right answer? Some would disagree and suggest an alternative mechanism or postulate that the universe exists, so it must have created itself. Our universe is just one of many universes, they say, perhaps as another option. And this one happens to be the one with life. Lucky for us. Unfortunately, these theories can't be tested because our scientific endeavour is limited to the universe in which we live. We need to get outside the universe to test these theories. But how can we do that? How can we get outside our own universe when we've not even stepped onto Mars, let alone visited a neighbouring galaxy? See, science alone constrains us to the universe in which we live and we can observe. But that does not mean that we have to discount God from the start. That would be a prejudice and bad science. I want to explore that idea for a second. If I was to walk into Coventry city centre and I stopped there a new Jaguar, it has to be a Jaguar because in Coventry, I might well ask the question, where did this come from? If all I have is the vehicle in front of me to assess, how likely am I going to determine the origin of that vehicle? Let's see. I can measure the temperature of the engine. I can analyse the grit in the tyres. I can maybe survey the bugs on the windscreen. But they won't tell me in any certainty of the vehicle's origin. That is all science has when considering the origin of the Earth. The stuff they can measure or analyse today. Then comes along somebody dressed like the Stig, driving suit, helmet, gloves, the works. He walks over to the car, opens it and gets in. He's the driver. What are you going to do now? Ask him the question, where did this car come from? Immediately what you're willing to do is get your question answered by someone who is not the car that you have been studying. You get a satisfactory response and he drives off. The point is this: if we're only going to study the creation and never talk to the Creator, we will limit our answers to only materialistic ones that cannot manage the bigger questions, such as why am I here? What is life all about? What happens after death? Is there really any justice? Why should I hope for the future? Science tells us that the world and the universe had a beginning. The Bible tells us in Genesis 1, verse 1, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. You see, the Bible presents to us an eternal creator, a God that made the observable universe in which we live. Not only that, the Bible presents a transcendent God, a God who is willing to enter his creation and become a human being. Again, the Bible tells us in John 1, verses 1 to 3, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God, and all things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. The context of John chapter 1 is in the introduction to a man called Jesus. One of his titles is the Word, another is Messiah, the Christ, the chosen one of God. Now the Bible doesn't suggest that God simply set the creation in motion. He's been involved with it ever since creation. Again, the Bible gives us clues. Colossians 1 verse 16 and 17 says, "For by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created by him and for him. And he is before all things, and by him all things consist." God did not need a cause because he is eternal. And he is holding things together as we speak. So God is still at work here and now. When scientific reason thought that the universe was eternal, it was accepted as logical that it didn't need a creator. Now we know if it has a beginning, it must have had a cause, or a creator. But if God is eternal, he is before all things, as we quoted. We should therefore be permitted to apply the same logic. God is self-existent, doesn't need a creator or a cause. God is the beginning of all things. That answers our first question. We are here because God created us. As we will see later in our lectures, the complexity of life has to be the result of a being of staggering intelligence. You are not here by any accident. The Bible has good news. Your life has meaning and purpose. You are created for love. Contrary to the belief that the cosmos is just a massive accident, the Bible presents the earth and humanity as a central part of God's eternal plan. God doesn't need us to exist any more than he needs anything else to exist, but he chose to take the time to make you and me because he's a God of love and wishes to love his creation. We cannot explain why God chose to do this, but we can see his character revealed to us through his personal revelation, Jesus Christ. Love is another thing that science has great difficulty in explaining. It's not just a mere chemical reaction. Why do we love? It's certain that we do love, and we certainly all understand the opposite of love is hate. We recoil from hate, but we are attracted to love. The Bible tells us that we are made in God's image and likeness. The Bible also tells us that as God is love, we too know a little bit about what love is. When the Lord Jesus was here on earth, he demonstrated love in a way that is without equal. There have been many selfless acts that people might point to, but tonight we are pointing to the cross lifted up outside Jerusalem nearly 2,000 years ago. As you read the Gospels, you see that it was the needy that came to Jesus and went away fulfilled. The self-righteous and the proud, they left empty. Jesus showed his compassion to the hungry, to the widows, to the sick and the sorrowing. He came to be love personified. Again, the Bible tells us in Romans 5, verse 8, for when we were yet without strength, in due time Christ died for the ungodly, for scarcely for a righteous man would one die. Yet peradventure for a good man someone even dare to die. But God commended his love toward us, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Jesus showed ultimate love, not just in dying for others, but dying for his enemies. Who would do such a thing? Someone who only knew that that was the only way. As we probe the vastness of space, we can never probe the depths of God's love for you and for me. It was fulfilled and demonstrated at the cross where Jesus died as our personal substitute. Years later, a Christian hater became convinced that he was on the wrong path. He became a Christian and subsequently wrote in Galatians 2 verse 20, I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. See, that man made it personal. Personal to him. He could say, Jesus died for me. He took my place. He suffered, so I can go free. Now, free from what? One of the biggest motivators that people have to cling to the idea that the universe is all that there is that's out there is that it removes accountability. If there is no God, and I'm not made by him, then I can do as I please, and there are no consequences to my actions. That's a poor theory, based on fear, that God somehow wants to spoil our fun and punish us when we let our hair down a little. It's ironic, really, that it's actually our conscience showing us that we're accountable, that we're trying to convince otherwise. Rules are not meant to be broken, and there are always consequences to our actions. We know this experimentally in our own lives. If we just try driving down the wrong side of the road, we know that that's folly. But many refuse to believe consequences extend beyond this life. But simply believing something doesn't make it real. Believing that there is no God doesn't change his existence any more than if I believed that Mondays didn't exist. They would suddenly become no longer be part of my reality. The Bible presents to us a creator God who is a God who loves. It also reveals a God who is aware of all things happening upon the earth and is grieved by wickedness that is evident around us. In the beginning, God made man perfect, but with the free will to choose for himself. And man chose to reject God and turn from that perfection. And humanity has followed in his footsteps. So it is today. God still shows us his mercy in withholding what we deserve and offering us true freedom through faith in Jesus Christ, his Son. We deserve God's judgment for our deeds, but Jesus came to be our deliverer. The Creator became the Saviour. And that's really who we want to introduce you to tonight. I've said my bit for starting off. I'm now going to introduce you to the next speaker. Of course, we're here for the duration, so we'll be happy to answer any questions if you want to at the end.